Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beastly Talks. I'm your host, Ian Helling, and I am very excited to have another guest with me today. It is from across the pond, all the way down in Tasmania, which I've never been to, but I really want to go to at some point. I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point in this conversation. But I have Mr. Ben Barnes from Huon Valley K9 with me. G'day, Ben. How are you going?
Very well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Like we were talking about before here, we kind of have the spring weather at the moment where it's a drought one day and then a flooding the next. So we kind of have the same thing here in Victoria.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely the season for it. I think we're up to about 60 mil in 24 hours at the moment. So tanks are full.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, full tanks is a good thing though.
Definitely.
Um, so I heard about you because you posted a video a little while back. Well, it's a while back now. But about a proposed e-collar ban in Tasmania. Now, I hadn't heard of this before, and I hadn't heard of you before. But that's when I immediately jumped on and I wrote, I submitted a big subscription. I nearly said a big submission against the e-collar ban. And then we've kind of been just chatting a little bit since then. And so I thought it'd be really cool to get you on because I work a lot with e-collars myself. And we've opposed the ban here in Victoria 3 times in the last 7 years, I think. And it's just this ongoing battle that I thought could be really cool to have a chat about and see what's happening, see what we think about e-collars, and yeah, just kind of go from there.
Yeah, sounds great.
But yeah, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? How'd you get into dog training? What kind of dogs do you work with? How do you work? And just give us your villain story, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I started dog training formally in about 2008. I'd done a year of film school and decided that wasn't for me. And then I saw a documentary on Discovery, I think called K9 Boot Camp, where they were it was just covering dogs in the US military and across all the branches of the military. And instantly, as soon as I saw what they could do with the dogs in that type of capacity, I was hooked and I immediately needed to find out more. So I pivoted from film school to a degree in criminal justice because I wasn't quite sure which sort of stream of working with dogs I wanted to go down, whether it was customs or police or the military. So while I was doing that, I did the NDETF course as well. So really enjoyed that broad brush application of animal training in general, and just met some really great people along the way whilst I was doing that. Was lucky enough to get a job with Australian Dog Training for sort of weekend group classes through Melbourne, which was again a really broad exposure to all the different breeds, dogs, and people in general, sort of pet training and reactivity and stuff like that. But as soon as I saw a working dog, I think it was a customs dog at that stage, just seeing the intensity and the communication with the handler, it was just an instant spark of interest and it was the coolest thing in the world. So that, yeah, just really fostered an interest in every type of working dog. Was lucky enough to get a job at Wellington Park Kennels for a couple of years under a trainer there, Shana Bamsey, who was awesome and really sort of mentored me through boarding and training at the kennels. So I suppose in hindsight, that opportunity to work under experienced trainers where they're watching you interact with probably 10 to, on the busy times, maybe 30 dogs a day. Again, all sorts of issues, all sorts of breeds, all sorts of owners was a really amazing opportunity pretty early on in my dog training experience just to, yeah, see the big wide world of dog training and where it was at. But ultimately, I was always interested in the working dogs. They just sort of seemed to be where my interest was really leading me. Luckily, pretty soon after finishing uni, I applied to be a military working dog handler in the Air Force, and I was in the Air Force for just over 4 years as a working dog handler, and that was sort of both parts great and bad, but ultimately decided that it wasn't for me. That sort of that situation and process really sparked my desire to basically run away into the bush to 25 acres in Tasmania and just went from there really. So it was sort of a decision to just sort of slow everything down a little bit and just try to be as reasonably self-sufficient as we could be and independent as we could be. And then that led to Huon Valley K9, which is just our little business down here these days, helping people with, yeah, everyday pet training and issues. We did do a little bit of puppy development for some working dogs as well in that time, which was really cool. But these days, it's just, yeah, pet clients with private lessons and group classes. Yeah, that's keeping us nice and busy. But we're in a really incredible part of the world where um, it's nice and quiet down here. So we're really not, or day to day, I'm really not involved in the dog world, so to speak. I just try and sort of keep to myself and use what works. As I've noticed, even from the get go, fads coming in and out of not only breeds, but methods and tools. So it's one of those things where, for me, the choice to, of course, try to be aware of things that are new and changing and that work better, but ultimately, if it's not broken, don't fix it. One of the most basic, simple exercises I learnt from day one is something that I still use today, even though it's sort of gone out of fashion for a lot of people, not all people, which is just sort of basic eye contact and beginning the most simple type of communication that we can get started with the dogs. So, yeah, it's an interesting place to work and live, but it's great. It definitely suits us, and it's good just sort of being detached from the broader dog training world. Because anytime I sort of check in on it, it's sort of like a good reminder as to why the quiet life suits me. And yeah, it's one of those things where my biggest challenge, I suppose, in that is the people and trying to get them to upskill their ability to see things from the dog's perspective and how all the different inputs of that, whether it's the genetics of the dog, how they're feeding it, all of those different factors are having a big impact on the big picture and trying to sort of slowly coax people into the reality that they can do it, but it is time and effort, and that remains the biggest struggle, is motivating people to put in the required time and respecting the dog for the animal that it is. Yeah, I suppose in a nutshell, that's sort of a bit of where I first got into training, what my interests have been, and where we are now.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. So actually you've done the full military working thing as well. Like that's interesting. So um like before we, because I want to hear a little bit more about that, but before we get into that, it, like I always say, to whether they're students of mine, whether they're trainers that I'm helping, um dogs are easy. People are fucking hard. Right. And a lot of people, I know I want to get onto the topic of genetics as well at some point, because I know you mentioned that on your website and it is a really important thing to talk about. But I wish people would do a little bit more research on the type of dog that they're getting before they're getting them these days, because I am seeing a lot of German Shepherds, working dogs, like super high drive hunting dogs that are just not in the right home. But let's come back to that a little bit later. For now, tell us a bit more about the military work and what goes on in there, because I imagine that's a pretty intense job.
Yeah, it was very tricky in terms of what I went into it expecting and what it ultimately ended up being. So that's sort of one of the main reasons that I left, is it just wasn't what I was expecting it to be. But luckily had some incredible experiences, and seeing hundreds of working dogs over that 4 years gave me just a really good appreciation for the subtle differences even in the Belgian Shepherd breed. I just thought, oh, Belgian Shepherd's a Belgian Shepherd, without seeing all the nuances of different structures, sizes, styles of biting, and all that sort of stuff. Luckily was able to spend about 7 weeks decoying for the SAS over in Perth as well, where you sort of just play the bad guy and just get demolished in a bite suit and hidden sleeve. So that was definitely a big challenge for me personally, because I'm not the bravest of fellas. So it was good to not only be in those circumstances where it is sort of like the cutting edge of that capability in terms of how they use dogs, but all the stories that they brought back from deployment about what did and didn't work was also like a really good eye opener as to the realities of deploying a dog in that type of I suppose role. So I suppose the amount of dogs that I was able to see and get hands on was great. Um, I suppose the tricky part, considering I had been doing a couple of years of training in Melbourne, it was a little bit tricky with where they were at in terms of the basic dog course and how they were still training dogs. So that was a lot of sort of biting my tongue and being quite surprised that things were the way they were, simply because it's such a big organization and, training changes take a long time. So I can't imagine what it's like now because it's well over a decade since I was there. But yeah, that was a really unique and interesting experience. But I think, yeah, the different decoys, the different ideas, and the different uh, changes you needed to make based on all these dogs and what they were doing was again just another really cool experience to be able to see what it was, see what it wasn't, and yeah, really tried to gain as much knowledge as I could from the people that had actually deployed these dogs in combat zones, which was a huge eye opener. And a lot of my assumptions weren't right, so that was really cool to sort of yeah, learn some new things. But yeah, so 4 years and was lucky enough to retire my last dog, which was great. So he spent a couple of years down here retiring with the good country life. So that was a really good way to finish it as well. So yeah, no, it was good.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I imagine like I've heard different things, and I don't know how much you can speak on this, or if you can't, then that's fine. But I presume there's a lot of compulsion based training in the military still, and less what we call, reinforcement based training with, food and play and that kind of stuff. Um, that being said, though, I mean, for these dogs, they are super tough and hard dogs. And the biggest positive reinforcement you can give them is to bite a decoy. Now, I think it's probably worth just mentioning for everyone listening that might not know what a decoy is, but a decoy is the guy in the suit that is just being bailed up by dogs and teaching them how to actually fight a person, how to get into combat with a person essentially and overpower them and win the fight. That is pretty much what a decoy is in the military sense, and in the sports sense, it's I guess more for getting points and that kind of stuff. Obviously, a lot of my listeners are Victorian because I'm in Victoria, where bite work is illegal. So it's kind of just worth elaborating on what that actually is. But I agree. I've done some traveling. I've taken bites from dogs, and that is a confronting thing. The first couple of times you have this 40-kilo monster just coming at you to to bite you and bruise you and bring you to the ground. That's an experience you have to work through mentally, and a lot of people can't, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking back on my introduction to that sort of stuff was pretty wild. And it would definitely be done differently. But again, often you don't really know, other than in hindsight, what the danger of that was. And again, back to sort of what you were saying about the compulsion in the military training, I think I was definitely there during a bit of a change where a lot of the individual instructors and handlers were like, "Hey, we kind of do need to let go of these methods because it's not only not working efficiently, it's causing a lot of good dogs to not get to their capability because we're sort of stuck in things that worked on a particular type of dog that was decades ago, and the dogs are changing not only in the breeds that they're selecting, but I suppose the toughness of those dogs, their sensitivities to, inconsistent handling and no clear direction. So it was good to sort of see those changes happening. And like I said, it's definitely different now, but I just don't know to what extent. But yeah, it was definitely quite tricky to have the knowledge that I got from the NDTF and my experience of a couple of these years of training, and then sort of be somewhat forced to take a couple of steps back in that regard, because you've kind of got to do what you're told in that sort of recruit style training. But then once you got out to the units, that's where things were a lot more relaxed and a lot more open minded in terms of this is you and your dog, and we need to kind of tailor whatever that training needs to be so that you're as effective as possible, and ultimately we're getting the best results out of the dog. And you don't want to be doing things just for the sake of it when you can see clearly it's not the best sort of direction to take that dog. So that was really good that it did have that flexibility.
Yeah, cool. And actually, that brings up a really interesting point, because the original method for training what we call hard dogs, so essentially dogs that have a lot of gusto and a lot of power and a lot of ability to withstand pressure and even punishment. That was Keeler. That was his original training books, right? Which is the Keeler method of training books, where they're 3 volumes. There's like 2,600 pages, I think. It's an encyclopedia of dog training. But I mean, that was some of the first dog training that was ever recorded, really. And it was very specifically targeted against those really super hard dogs. And I guess, when the training, like, I guess I should say official dog training started back in like the 60s and the 70s. Um, a lot of people didn't think dogs had feelings. They didn't think they had emotions. They were just these like biting machines that you could input something into, which was pressure and punishment, and they would output, biting or attacking people, which is what you were looking for. And we've come so far in the last 50 years, and we know dogs have complex emotions, and they are driven by reinforcement, whether that's positive or negative reinforcement, but they also respond to punishment. That is just a natural part of life. And but it's good to see that these places are updating though. And I think I remember Pat Stewart from the K9 Paradigm talking about this, how the military is such a massive machine, and it's such a steadfast machine that changing it takes just decades and decades. Like, changing even small things takes decades, because there has to be a playbook that, even if the country was decimated, someone has to pick up this book and go, okay, this is exactly how we run things, right? Which is why it's such a slog to get anything changed, even something as little as, I presume, introducing more positive reinforcement based training methods into the canine unit. And like, I get it, but it's really good to see that they're actually catching on and they're updating their methods a little bit. That's
Yeah,
super cool.
absolutely. And the I suppose difference between Air Force military working dog kennel and then going to a very small specialized dog unit like the SAS was a good example of the difference between the small scale ability to pivot towards what works best versus we've got hundreds of handlers and dogs, and one change amongst all of those people can have bad knock-on effects that we didn't really see coming because of how they're implementing it. Whereas with that smaller unit that, really was the tip of the capability, had that flexibility and direct feedback with all these very sort of capable handlers to not really worry about that as much because it's not on such a bigger scope. And again, the results in the dogs really reflected that as well. So yeah, that was good to sort of see the difference between one big huge machine and then sort of a smaller unit within that being able to have a lot more ability to make those changes as they deemed it was necessary.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, and I mean, that makes sense. I guess when you're faced with really difficult situations, you kind of have to be very adaptable right there and then.
Yeah, especially the difficulty of those very hard earned lessons. And I suppose, one example is going there, I was expecting to see, the nastiest, most aggressive and dangerous dogs and people, and that wasn't the case at all. They sort of were like, "Listen, if we're gonna be in a helicopter with these animals, the last thing we want is something that's eyeing everyone off, looking to eat anyone they can." Stability is a lot more important, at least at that stage, than just the raw fighting sort of power of the dog. So that was the nuance to that, and how they sort of managed to get a balance of both of those sort of capabilities, was, yeah, a really good sort of thing to see, where I didn't really assume that was going to be the case, but that was great.
No, and I'm so glad you brought that up because that's something that's changed in most of Australia, I think, where a lot of the unless you have the particularly extreme working dogs, most of these dogs, they don't live in kennels anymore. They live with the handler, right? So what was the case back in the day was you would train these dogs and you would breed these absolute hellhounds that were just aggressive as all shit. And you would train them with heavy compulsion, and then they would just live in kennels. And they would, someone would go in a bite suit to get a muzzle on them and a prong collar on them, and then they would drag them out and the work would begin kind of thing. Whereas now it is much more focused on, no, no, I need this dog to be social. I need him to be sociable and be able to be around people and only display, you know, controlled aggression when we ask them to. And so that's a really cool change. And I mean, that's a testament to how far dog training has come in the last few decades, right? The fact that we can have these dogs that are trained attack dogs that just live in homes with children and everything, and there's no problems at all.
Yeah, that was definitely a big eye opener for me, not knowing anything about dogs, is that that was possible. You could have a balanced dog that was very level headed, very confident, and wasn't a liability. If anything, was a very safe dog, because that sort of uh, that genetic disposition to be able to do that was just so thoroughly understood by the dog that it wasn't unpredictable and coming from a place of nervousness. It was sort of a confident clarity between the handler and the dog.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Now, actually, this brings about an interesting conversation. So, number one, are prong collars legal in Tassie? I didn't look this up. They're not. Okay.
No. Yeah, a couple of years ago, they got banned, and that's sort of, like, very much so mirrored with what they're trying to do now with e-collars. So, yeah, that's, I suppose, why, I've changed tact a little bit on the e-collar ban, after having gone through the pinch collar ban and what didn't work there.
Yeah, okay. So, um, before we get into the tool bans, because we're going to talk a lot about that, does the military have exemptions? Like they do here in Victoria, military and police, I should say, for prong collars and, those kind of aversive tools that are banned for the public.
I'm not sure in terms of Tasmania. I would imagine that the, um police could. I think one of the exceptions with the e-collar is that working dogs are exempt, but I don't think that that covers the pinch collars. As far as I know, there's no dogs in Tasmania that are working that are using pinch collars, at least sort of overtly. So there's no military dogs down here. It's all just police dogs, and I don't think, yeah, we don't have any general duties police dogs. It's all just detection dogs, and I don't think the prisons have any dogs either. So there's a very small amount of working dogs in Tasmania in terms of the government.
Yeah, okay, okay. And that's interesting, and that brings about a lot of things because so here in Victoria, prong collars are banned, e-collars are legal. And but both the military here and the police have exemptions for using these tools. So the K9 unit in both the military and the police down here are allowed to use prong collars, obviously openly. But what's interesting is with the prong collar ban that came into Queensland, when was that? About 12 months ago? I think maybe 12, 18 months ago, that kind of super unexpected proposal from a politician that just suddenly threw up a photo of a prong collar on social media and went like, these torture devices, we have to ban them, right? And no one in the dog space was expecting this. So we all went, what the fuck is this? Like, why do they care about prong collars suddenly? And it turns out it was literally just like a small grab to get all the dog lovers or the animal lovers, right, to get on board and vote for them last minute so that they could actually win and put this ban through. But two of the very interesting things about that is number one, out of five people who voted on whether or not to enforce the ban, three voted against the ban, two voted for. But still, they did override everything and introduce the ban. And so this becomes important because now we know that it has nothing to do with welfare of animals or how we train animals. It's got everything to do with the fact that this is a political play funded by big organizations that are very, what should we say, pro animal welfare, but misguided in the direction of animal welfare at the same time. But the other thing that is interesting is the way that the law is written in Queensland is written in a manner that doesn't actually technically allow for exemptions for police and military because it promotes the tool as inherently cruel and torturous to the animal, right? So it's not that it has certain uses, or like here in Victoria, I think it says you cannot possess or utilize a pinched or pronged collar on your dog. But that's all that it says. Whereas from what I know, and I haven't read the final legislation, I know it's been introduced, but I haven't been able to read it yet. But from what it says up there is that pinched or prong collars are by definition an abusive tool and no one can use them. And so now what happens is they're taken away even from police and military, right? Because the police and the military cannot be seen to actively abuse dogs, right? So just by the simple wording of the legislation, we've now created it more difficult for these super high intense working dogs to actually do their job. And that is a huge problem. And this is going to bring us into more of the tool bans here and that kind of stuff. But so the reason why I found out about you was because you were kind of leading the charge against the e-collar ban in Tasmania. I saw a couple of videos. You were putting up some statistics from the RSPCA, and you were showing a lot of videos of happy dogs working in situations they could normally work in, especially not with force-free guidance. And that's when you were asking for submissions and everything. And I just want to know, was that successful? Like, did you get a lot of submissions? Did you get a lot of opposition to the e-collar ban in Tassie? And where is it currently at? Because I haven't heard much about it for a long time.
Yeah, sure. There's a few different impacts to the submission process. But long story short, our government had a early election or something because the red team said the blue team wasn't popular enough or something. So it was sort of in the middle of.
That is such a, sorry to interrupt, but that is such a good way of putting politics these days. The red guys didn't like the blue guys and fuck it, we're shutting down government.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I got told the last time, which we're just in caretaker mode at the moment, so nothing's gonna happen for quite a long time. But the I suppose what was really weird is that the minister that released the discussion paper for it this time around, unlike the pinch collar, which was a different minister, but they actually did agree to meet with me so that I could kind of hopefully show them it and, give them some reality around how they're used and why they're used. So that was really good that they were willing to meet me. But they weren't really aware of what the tool was, and they were quite surprised that it was even on the cards to ban them. And that was a real bit of a mind blower because it's like this was a discussion paper you released with very pointed wording that they should be banned and catch up with, other jurisdictions around Australia that already had. So that was sort of like, all right, well, then where is this coming from? Because if the minister that's released um, Word document or the word picture, whatever it is, discussion paper,
Yep.
isn't really aware of what it is, why it's they're wanting to ban it and all those sorts of things, then where is it coming from? Um, so similar to the pinch collar ban, my best guess, because it's very hard to get a straight answer out of anyone that's sort of a bureaucrat, was the Department of Natural Resources and Environment, or someone in some type of government entity has some very strong opinions about what dog training should be. And somehow that sort of filtered its way towards shaping public policy, despite there being very little, you know, there wasn't like an abuse case. There wasn't like lots of there wasn't any injuries or anything associated with these things. It's just very sort of deep-seated ideology for someone in these bureaucratic departments to decide that we're going to underhandedly introduce this. And that's reflected in the wording that they used, on shock collars as opposed to e-collars and things like that. The public submissions, I was very disappointed in a lot of the mainland dog trainers that I individually reached out to say, hey guys, it's a 10-minute process. If you as a professional could just put a couple of paragraphs together explaining why these tools are valuable, I think that that would hold a huge amount of weight, because with the pinch collar, my efforts were towards directly speaking to the politicians in the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee, going, this is a horrible looking tool, the pinch collar. Of course, your natural reaction is to go, well, yeah, we're definitely not using that anymore. But after what I was hoping to hand over case studies, show how it's worked, how it's used and how it's not used, I, very naively was like, well, once they have a bit of an appreciation of exactly why it's used and the dogs that it can save and the injuries that it can prevent, truth and reality will persevere, and they'll go, okay, we definitely had a bad idea about what this is, but now it's sort of been laid out thoroughly. We'll sort of reconsider it. Um, got ignored and lied to through the whole pinch collar process and gaslit. And one of the mistakes that I made was to not try and push the public submissions, because, it was just sort of like, listen, just approach them individually as a professional and just try and tell them that. So this time with the e-collars, I was very different, and I tried to, ring the bell to everyone that I knew, going, hey guys, as many professional trainers or as many people as possible that have used e-collars, please just throw in your 2 cents as to how they've helped you. And, not necessarily where you've been failed by other training tools and methods, but just sort of calmly explain to these people how it has given you and your dogs safety and freedom. And I was, yeah, when I did see the final sort of count of the submissions, I was really blown away by how few there were from professional dog trainers in Australia. Your one was awesome, and there was a couple, and some very brave people from Tasmania as well also put in a submission. My mum put in a submission, for God's sake. So the idea that people who use these tools, whether overtly or discreetly, were not willing to put in 5 or 10 minutes just to sort of get the numbers in favor of keeping them legal was just like, wow, why not? And it's a real bummer that, again, a lot of people are a bit too afraid, maybe afraid, or maybe it just sort of slipped their mind, whatever. But it was just really disappointing when it was just so clear that it was a golden opportunity to try and put a lot of weight on our side by, I suppose, showing and demonstrating how many dogs are saved from these tools. It was just a real bummer. But we did ultimately get far more people supporting e-collars as opposed to wanting to ban them. So it was a case, and we've got the specific numbers, but yeah, many more people wanted e-collars to remain legal. Fewer wanted them banned. And even that, what was it? It was the biosecurity summary of all the public submissions was once again full of this biased language that did not reflect the public submissions. So, in a nutshell, their case was, there's a couple of people support them, but overwhelmingly people want them banned. And that again was not the case. That was exactly the opposite of what the public submissions were saying. So emailed them saying, "Hey guys, your report on these public submissions is not actually correct." And once again, as with the pinch collar, we got a reply that was very bureaucratic, very ambiguous, and reassured us that it would be a balanced and fair outcome. And we've seen anything but so far. So, you can hope that things might change, but based on previous examples with the pinch collar, it's just delaying tactics of gaslighting and lying to us until ultimately the day comes and they can ban them because it's, fashionable, or it appears to an ignorant public that they are banning something that just is inherently bad. When, yeah, as soon as you spend 5 or 10 minutes seeing how they're meant to be used and the results that they get, it's a very different story. So at the moment, I'm just waiting to find out who the minister is that's going to kind of pick up the ball and run with this, because I think the minister has changed and start the process again based on sort of what they're saying and where they're sort of influenced by these bureaucrats is. Because, yeah, as far as I can tell, and it's definitely a guess, that's where it's coming from, is some strong opinions within the unelected government that is trying to underhandedly ban them. And once again, all of these people I've reached out to say, listen, please give me an alternative. I'll be the first to jump on any method or tool that you think will be able to do it. I'd love to show you what I do so that it can sort of dispel some myths. And, again, I do go there with an e-collar, run through the basics of it and make sure that they've got a little bit more facts around it, as opposed to them thinking that it's just a taser attached to a collar. So that might need to just happen again based on where they're at now and how much of a priority it is for them. Because between all the things going on down here, it's very clear, understandably so, that this is just a non-issue for them. They don't really care, and what's most important to them is where the public's opinion will be, despite the public not knowing anything about them.
Yeah, and man, you touch on a lot of things there. That is just such a fucking common thread to go through all of this tool ban nonsense, right? And so I'm writing a bunch of notes here as you're talking, just trying to
Yeah.
remember everything. But like the first thing that I want to talk a little bit about is the fact that the truth doesn't actually matter.
Mhm.
And that is a big problem, especially in the dog training industry, because we have people like yourself, like myself, like so many trainers all around the world that are pumping out videos of showing these fearful, shut down, aggressive dogs. We put an e-collar on them, and in 2, 3, 4 days, their tails are coming up. They're coming out of their shell. They're starting to play, right? And I think it's Dr. Melanie Uda that talks a lot about this, but she says I have to remember this, AVSAB, American Veterinary Behavior Association. I can't remember the
Yeah.
abbreviation
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. But I think she talks a lot about how they have 24 statements that kind of is proof, and I'm doing air quotes for anyone just listening and can't see me, Ben, at this point. But proof that aversives in dog training is a bad thing, and it shuts dogs down, makes them fearful, makes them aggressive, blah, 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 whatever the latest fad is for that. And one of the important things to understand is that more than half of those 24 proofs are owner surveys. Now, a dog owner survey in a high level, complicated behavior case has absolutely zero value, because that is literally just an opinion piece. So the fact that people are jumping on a website, typing in their name, saying, fuck e-collars, I don't like e-collars, right? Because it makes dogs aggressive. That's an agenda that's been pumped out to them for a very long time. But these are people who do not know how to read dogs, who do not know how to, who don't understand body language, who don't understand aggression, the rehabilitation process. And holding that as one of the main reasons why these tools are bad is just complete and utter nonsense to begin with. So out of 24, more than half of them are owner surveys, and the other half are completely flawed studies. I presume you're familiar with the DEFRA study that was
Mhm.
conducted in the UK a couple of years back. Um, I'm not going to go into details on that because I want to actually go into details with that at some point. But that is one of the most flawed studies ever created. That was set up not to find out if e-collars were bad. It was actually set up to be proving that positive reinforcement training is better than e-collar training.
Mhm.
And the way that they did that is they selected particular dogs from particular places. They trained the positive reinforcement dogs only inside a controlled environment, and they trained the e-collar trained dogs outside in the middle of winter. So they were actually setting the study up to make sure that the e-collar training would fail one way or another. But at the end of the day, in an interview with the people who conducted the study, they did say that the positive only trained dogs were not even tested on sheep because it wasn't safe, whereas the
Yeah.
e-collar trained dogs were tested, right? And so this is the kind of bias and just blatant gaslighting, as you said, against these tools that has no real value, no real truth to them. It is simply an ideology that's trying to be sold through mass media. And again, like, don't get me wrong. When people say you never have to say no to your dog, you never have to punish your dog, I'm like, holy shit, that's amazing. I never have to tell this creature that I love, as much as my missus almost. I never have to be cruel to them.
Mm,
Right. And you hear that, and it's a very easy sell.
mm,
Whereas when you say, hey, I've got this device that stimulates a dog electrically from a distance, everyone goes like, shock. And
mm,
they just stop listening immediately because, like, you just want to abuse dogs.
mm,
So that ideology has become so incredibly ingrained over the last, I don't know, 15 years. I think that's when the whole kind of positive only force free really started taking off. And, and another problem with this, and exactly to the point that you had with not enough people putting in submissions, etc., is balanced trainers can't even agree on how to use a fucking e-collar.
mm,
Right? So you have this wave of force-free trainers or positive-only trainers or fear-free or whatever they call themselves these days. But they have one goal, and that is ban all aversion, right? That's very simple. It's very simple to go, anything that the dog might perceive as aversive, we want it banned. And it's, of course, easy to start with a prong collar because the prong collar does look like a medieval torture tool if you don't know what you're doing, right? Or if you don't know how they work, I should say.
yeah.
And then the next step down becomes the e-collar because, like, oh, we're shocking dogs, right? And you're like, well, no, actually, we're not. But that's a whole different conversation. And then they're going to take away slip leads. And then they're going to take away flat collars, and then what happens before long, dogs are only allowed to be walked on harnesses, right? Or head halters, which, funnily enough, is probably the most aversive tool on the planet. I
Yeah.
reckon, I reckon if we could speak to dogs and we put 100 dogs on prong collars and 100 dogs on head collars afterwards, 100 of those 100 dogs would say, like, no, put the prong collar back on.
Mm, yeah. And again, science can tell you whatever it is going to tell you, but looking at the dog and their reaction to it is a huge factor of truth for me. Um, I suppose back to what you were saying about the studies and their misuse of it for the pinch collar ban, they did a literature review that the University of Tasmania did. And going through the 80 references in that literature review, the studies they used and the conclusions they came to was such a shocking eye opener as to just how dulled down, captured, and incorrect that process of those reviewing those studies was, to the point where they came to the opposite conclusions of the studies. So I think the best and quickest summation of that is on one of my YouTube videos, which is like a prong collar update. It's the last one. And it just goes through one of the studies that they selected, saying, here is why we're justifying the ban of the prong collars or why they're bad. Yet the study said exactly the opposite of what they were saying to Parliament. And similar to, the RSPCA directly lying to Parliament without any consequence. And we've got someone who's funded by the public directly lying to the public and Parliament with no consequences whatsoever, all because of the fashionable appearance of appearing to be kind to animals. And one of the things I say to these people when I meet them is, listen, I'm probably seeing, up to 20, 30 dogs a week. The happiest dogs that I see are the dogs that have a purpose aligned with their genetics. They have clear boundaries and purpose. And the unhappiest dogs I see are the ones that have no direction, no purpose. They are an extension of their human sort of like, you know, unhealthy attachment and loving them as an animal that they're not. And all the science in the world is never really going to uncover that reality that, what you see with your own eyes and what you can experience through seeing all of these dogs week to week is just something that flies in the face of a lot of scientific literature. And then when you peel back that scientific literature, the base of the weight that they're using is, as you say, surveys, studies which measure insane metrics in very unpredictable environments, and abuse cases where it's like, well, yeah, of course the dog's not going to have a good time because that's not training, that is abuse. And, you're conflating reasonable methods of training, which have very strong reality based outcomes, like does the dog look happy? Is it safer? Is it freer? And you're connecting that to just cruelty and cases of cruelty. So they definitely rely on that because your average politician does not have time to go through 85 dog scientific, studies, again, invisible air quotes, because they just don't care. And that's not really important to them. They just want to sort of go, well, what sounds good? What's going to make me look like I'm tough on animal welfare, despite all the metrics getting worse in terms of rehoming and attacks and all of those things. So it's that really infuriating mix of logic and truth is out the window, this pseudoscience that makes people feel good about what they're doing despite being not based in reality at all, and then ultimately more dogs being killed than ever before. It's a really infuriating mix of craziness, but I am heartened by a lot of people that now, after doing it for nearly 20 years, I've got like a succinct spiel of, hey, like our road rules, could you imagine the roads with no laws and no consequences and no proper instruction? So using little sort of stories and anecdotes like that, most people, they're either like, yeah, that absolutely is starting to make sense because even with some of my kids' friends, I'm really noticing that the ones without any boundaries and structure are in a really rough place, and the ones that are loved, but they do know the difference between good and stupid behavior, and that they get healthy consequences for dangerous and shit decisions, are very much more so resilient, confident, capable, and happy. And when you give people the time to kind of like put those dots together, even across species, there's that sort of just ultimate natural truth that a lot of people do ultimately go, I did see Ben and one of his dogs, and my God, it looked like it was having the time of its life. It was really happy, and then I saw another person's dog and they can't let it off the leash. But if they do let it off the leash, that dog's going to run like a slave, like it's not happy, it's not fulfilled, and it's really ultimately a bit of a liability to itself because it's in a really bad way. And again, a lot of people see that firsthand, but then when you're captured so badly by emotions and what sounds good, and unfortunately there are across the world people doing the wrong thing, that's really brought to the front because again it really gets those emotions going, and that's where a lot of people make their decisions from.
Yeah. Uh, Again, just another stream of fucking perfect consciousness that I need to now try and remember everything that you were saying and respond to. But I want to start by one of the cleverest things that the force free community has done is rebrand punishment automatically as abuse.
Mm,
Because punishment, um, and I actually had a friend of mine, like I was, he's not a dog guy at all, but I was kind of explaining to him, like, hey, we use reinforcement and then we use punishment, and this is kind of how that worked. And he's like, oh, you should probably change the word punishment. And I'm like, why? What? And he was like, no, but like it sounds really bad. And I'm like, yeah, but that's the scientific definition. Some fucking random Norwegian guy living in Australia, can't change the scientific definition of the reduction of behavior. Like that is not for me to do. That is for
mm,
me to explain to people.
mhm,
Right. But rebranding this idea that any form of punishment, even saying the word no to your dog is abusive in some form or shape, has just completely eliminated the conversation about pressure and punishment, right? And it has taken it so far to the positive reinforcement side that we're essentially climbing an up, like with not climbing an uphill battle. Wow. Uh, sometimes I have this thing where I try and translate something directly from Norwegian
yep,
when I'm concentrating really hard, and
yep.
my missus calls it Norwegianisms. But we have this thing where you're climbing. But what's
Yeah.
it called in English? Like when you're climbing an uphill battle.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that thing. Like we call it
Oh,
warring an uphill battle.
yeah. Okay.
Um, but yeah, so we're stuck in a corner now where everyone goes, well, anyone who says no to their dog, anyone who pulls on the leash of their dog if the dog isn't on the harness, are by definition abusive. But then they've also managed to rebrand things like the gentle leader. Fucking air quotes are coming out all the time here at the moment. But the gentle leader, that is one of the most abusive tools on the planet, is sold to us as like the one-stop solution for everything that is uh makes the dog happy. And I don't think I've to date have seen a happy dog. Like I have seen some super well trained assistance dogs,
Yeah,
and a
you
lot
really
of them.
roll the nose and, very, again, the proper use of it for the right dog in the right context, fantastic. But the broad brush that it's being used to substitute all these much better tools, you see directly for yourself the dog going, oh shit, this thing's going on again, and it's not good news.
And
Yeah.
I think another thing on that, just real quick, you see in these Facebook groups, uh, and I think this is one of the things that really upsets me. And we will get back to tools and e-collars. I'm just going on a bit of a tangent here.
Sure.
But one of the things that I see a lot in, especially force-free Facebook groups, is people going like, "Hey, I've been conditioning a gentle leader for 3 months, and my dog still hates it. It still tries to scratch it off. It's still pulling through it, and blah blah blah." And the answer is always just keep going. There are never any results, but the answer to not getting results is just keep going. And was it Einstein that said if you expect a fish to climb a tree, you're gonna have shitty results, right?
And the definition of insanity of, keep doing the same thing, expecting something to change.
That's the one. That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and again, I think it's difficult because a lot of these people, they invest so much money and time into becoming force free, into never being cruel to dogs, as they call it, never to abuse dogs, never to make the dog fearful, anything like that.
Mhm.
They invest so much time, money, and effort into it that it becomes a sunken cost fallacy where they go like, well, no matter what, at this point, under any circumstance, I have to make it true. And that's when we step out of science and we step into religion.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we find ourselves stuck a lot at the moment. And I mean, so many of these people, they spend so much time online just hammering in this idea, never say no to your dog, never do this. Um, and we're just fighting that uphill battle because no matter what we say or do, no matter how much content we post, no matter how much we show that dogs are happy and they're doing things with us, we're always the bad guy, right?
And they also sort of, if their schedule of reinforcement doesn't work after a couple of months, it must be you, or, there must be some sort of underlying trauma, or there must be something broken with the dog. Therefore, we need to medicate it, manage it, or put it down, which is all in some cases very reasonable outcomes. But the extent to which that is done, when you know what you're sort of seeing, is really leveraging people's beautiful intentions around the love of their animal and monetizing it because it keeps them dependent upon them. It keeps them thinking that they must just be doing something wrong. When the reality is they're getting shit advice to keep them coming back. Maybe, maybe not, but it certainly, again, it definitely does keep people going back despite the
Would you
reality.
say would you say one more time that these people are being gaslit?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's a real shame of like directly, if you call yourself a professional dog trainer and you're taking people's money, the onus is on you to seek out that efficient and solid advice that is actually going to work. And that's where, if I take the leash of someone's dog and I go, this is what we're ideally training you to do so that you don't need me anymore and you know exactly what to do no matter what your dog does. That's what I really try to aim for. Whereas, again, some of the crazy advice of, the whole gambit of, chucking a handful of food on the floor. Poor lady came to a lesson with me with 3 different treat bags on for 3 different sort of styles of treats and barriers and tools and had been going for, over a year and a half. And the dog was Prozac, to its maximum, just horrifically over and just out of its skin with nervousness. And again, within a couple of lessons of just some easy clarity and some finding tweaks to that sort of process of rewarding them, the change is undeniable, and that's where that reality needs to come back into it as to like what are the actual results. But yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for people's really good intentions in loving their dog and wanting the best outcome, but also needing to be based in reality around what exactly is causing this. And a lot of the time, I see that it's just really shit advice given to lovely people because any idea around consequences, and back to what you were saying about punishment, I'll often start just taking, instead of saying punishment, consequences, because again, for the modern person, that is a much more like palatable word. When the reality is it is punishment, and without it, the world would be chaos. Like that is a truth that is, again, impossible to ignore. But when it's turned into something connected inherently to cruelty, people are really scared of being called cruel to animals. It's one of the biggest social pressures that we face, which again is why so many people are afraid to, you know, live from reality and tell it how it is. So sometimes consequences is that sort of bridge between, well, if you've come from this sort of style of training and you've finally made that decision to see what else is out there, those analogies around road rules and consequences instead of punishment can sort of ease them into that reality instead of often it's like, this is now boot camp and it's an entirely different style of dog training and we're going to really get your dog into shape by scaring it. And then you see people go, oh, this is not at all what I got told. And within a couple of sessions, I'm tangibly seeing my dog happier, freer. And although I might be struggling to do it, at least when, someone like Ben interacts with the dog, it's very clear to see the difference in the dog's entire demeanor. And again, easing people into that is something that has taken a long time because it's only fair that when they love their dog so much, if you're very sort of forceful and, arrogant, that really turns people off as well, as opposed to going, listen, you you've done your best. You've unfortunately been given some really terrible advice. Here are the initial changes that we're going to tweak slightly, and then as a result of getting that success, opens up their mind a little bit to the reality of what dogs are, and yeah, back to, what punishment is and what it needs to achieve to not only be ethical but also really give that dog its life back, and hopefully the owners as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I spend a lot of time trying to explain to people that punishment as well as reinforcement, it, it these aren't dog training things. They aren't dog training concepts, right? This is natural, and so I think I touched a little bit of on this in an earlier episode, but I like to think of the stove, right?
Mm.
The stove can cook you positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is an ongoing process that never really ends. How many times have you touched a hot stove? Right? That is the punishment aspect of learning the rules around how to use the stove. And then when you understand that, when you get too close to the stove, your arm gets a little bit hot and you move away, that's negative reinforcement. Then the stove stops working and you get pissed off because now it's negative punishment because you can't make your positive reinforcement, right? And people get so hung up in the tools, and I think the tools is what is creating this like misinformation highway where people go, well, look at this tool, look at what it does to dogs, even though I don't actually understand what it does. Anyone who uses anything like this is the same as people saying no to dogs. And suddenly we have this line in the sand where any form of pressure or punishment is inherently cruel and there is no coming back from it, right? Um, but yeah, look, coming back to talking about the death before discomfort people.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, that would be a fucking hard thing to sell 10 years ago. Whereas now it's seen as the ultimate moral way of training dogs. It's like, don't make your dog feel any aversives, don't make it go through any adversity, just kill it because that's better, right?
Yeah,
And that
that's
is
the
a
position
level,
by veterinary groups, which is
yeah,
fine. Yeah.
that is a level of insanity that you and I are fighting against. And
Mm.
that is a
Yeah.
tough fight to fight when someone thinks that's okay. Because now it's not even ideology anymore. Now it's religion.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and it's back to your stove analogy. I use horses and echidnas in the same sort of way of like, listen, science is going to find whatever they go out looking for, is a very weird sort of way of saying it. But the universal reality of how nature works and the interactions between animals, that's set. That's not really a dog tries to bite an echidna and gets an unpleasant consequence. That's something that we don't really bake into the dog. That's there. All we're doing as humans is trying to humanely use that built-in learning mechanism with the minimal amount of sort of consequences necessary to again keep that dog safe and making good decisions by the already baked in learning mechanism the dog and the animal has. And that really does help people put out of their mind all the dogma and nonsense they get told in Disneyfying these dogs, going, yeah, ultimately it is a dog. And I can absolutely understand lots of parallels in my life where consequences are necessary, but they have been bastardized into something that is not true. And luckily, the world, luckily or unluckily, depending how you look at it, that reality is really spilling out into real life now. So people are really going like, what is going on? And it's like, well, there's a few things that are matching up here that are universally true. As much as we'd like to deny them, they're making things the way they are. And maybe it's time to sort of reassess exactly what we've been told. So that's, again, I think good that a lot of people I speak to, when it's calmly explain to them in those ways. And then again, they see a happy dog, they see a dog that has gone from this to something new. That's where that truth ultimately really sinks in and they're like, shit, yeah, this is undeniable now. I'm seeing it in my own dog and it's happier than ever before.
Oh, absolutely. And that is so important. And that's why at the end of every training session, if I'm using slip leads, if I'm using e-collars, right? Obviously prong collars are banned here, so we can't use them. But if I'm using some form of versip, at the end of the session, I always say to the owner, does your dog look calmer and happier now than before I arrived? And 99% say yes, right? Look,
Mm.
I meet the occasional dog that is so shut down that you go like, wow, I don't even know where to start with this dog, right? But 99% of people, they're like, I've never seen my dog this calm and happy before.
Yeah. Yep. And I'm
And all
always
we've done is, yeah, give that little bit of clarity to them.
and that there's nothing magic about it, you know, like there's no dog whispering. There's nothing like I don't put any drugs in my pockets to like make the dog like me more. It's just they can finally see a human that is making sense, is fair. And then once that trust is built, that's where very quick change tends to happen because, you know, I mean, force free trainers are some of the best marketers for me because a couple of changes that you make and a couple of simple things that have been done wrong can have some huge impacts. And then if that dog ever does need those sorts of consequences or anything like that, it's it's born out of the results that have already happened. So people have a lot more like, yeah, this change is absolutely clear. I've got a very like level-headed, normal understanding of exactly why the dog was there and now it's here. And now I can see the advantage of being able to say no to this dog and show them some healthy consequences for dangerous behavior. So yeah, I think that goes a long way to really demystifying the whole dog cruelty scientific matrix that a lot of normal people just don't have the time or energy to be able to, I suppose, come into the process with confidence one way or another. But those realities of a happy dog and things that make sense really do get people to go, yep, that makes sense. It's looking good. Therefore, let's keep going until we're sort of got the position we want with the dog. And again, freedom and happiness and sensible control.
It's funny because as you were saying that, I just wrote, note to self, put Vicodin in prime 100 for better results.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. So we're gonna move on here because I know we're getting a little bit stuck at this point. But now I might be remembering this wrong, but did you post a video of like you had requested the evidence for why e-collars were being banned, and you were making a video about flicking through the pages, and there was a lot of blacked out things.
Yeah.
Was that you?
Yeah, that was for the pinch collar ban, and that was the deliberations of the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee. The
Oh,
board.
that was for the pinch collar ban. Yeah, okay, sorry.
But no, that's right, because it's the same rule book they're going by. And that was the aid organization that said, absolutely, we'd love to hear about pinch collars, and then didn't, and then banned it. So that was me going through a right for information and then saying, this is what we'll give you. But you can't see what the deliberations were.
So talk us through that because a lot of people wouldn't have seen that video, whereas I saw it and I was absolutely flabbergasted by it.
Yeah, it's just insane that a taxpayer funded committee that is here to protect animal welfare in Tasmania that experiments on animals, races them for gambling, and, you know, I suppose euthanizes healthy dogs for things like jumping fences and reactivity and livestock killing would not release their deliberations. It's like, we're not talking about state secrets. Why would we not be able to see what you're discussing in regard to this? So all we got out of that was the literature review from the University of Tasmania. So that's sort of what we did ask for. But yeah, it was just mind blowing to just be treated like that with none of them ever having trained a dog, no dog trainers on the advisory committee. And yeah, that's what we got back, which was like most of it was redacted. And
And
whenever
just like two people listening, like watching this video, you see Ben sitting down and he talks a little bit about, hey, we received this supposed evidence. Fuck, I need some sound for air quotes. But he's sitting down and he's going like, this supposed evidence, we're going to flick through together on video. And it is page after page after page, and it looks like the Epstein files. Like, it is insane. It is just blacked out, one word open, blacked out, blacked out, blacked out, one word open. Like, there is literally no information in that thing that was sent out to you as the proof of why pinch collars are bad. And it just goes to show again to me that this has got nothing to do with animal welfare. This has got everything to do with public opinion and political pressure, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, and very ideological bureaucrats that aren't elected, but they know because they've got a government job, they're not going anywhere. So they can use the mechanisms of government to get in what they think is best. Once again, despite never having trained a dog, never having used any of these tools, and sitting back, letting, you know, organizations euthanize all these perfectly healthy animals when we're sitting here with, you know, so many case studies of dogs that were going to be put down or would be put down if they got into the hands of these people. And yeah, it's like, well, what could you possibly have against, well, we know, but it's just an insane take to have that despite you showing us all these dogs that would have been put down and now they're happy and safe and, you know, off leash in a lot of circumstances, we're going to completely demonize that whilst we just continue what we're doing because it appears that we're kind to animals and it's just the exact opposite. So that was again another big eye opener as to just how secretive, murky, and crazy these bureaucrats make decisions and enforce them upon us.
Yeah, and man, it was a fucking crazy eye opener to me, and that just made me fight even harder, to be honest. Whether it's working or not, I guess we'll see in the future. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I thought that was you. I wasn't 100% sure because I saw that a couple of years ago. But man, that was a crazy video. You should repost that so that hopefully when people listen to this, they can actually watch it again because it is
Yeah.
beyond insanity.
Yeah, the whole process with this and the pinch collar was, yeah, a real, again, another big eye opener as to exactly who is making the decisions, how, and where, yeah, truth, logic, and reality is out the window. Like not even meeting a professional dog trainer, not even going to the effort of listening to both sides, because everyone that targets us online, it's the same process. Hey, I think you've got the wrong idea about what we do. Love to catch up so that we could chat and I could show you my dog and how it works. And above everything else, I am begging for an alternative. The
Mm.
day that you've got a better, more efficient, safer, and better way to stop these very normal predatory behaviors, I'll be there with bells on and I'll be happy as ever because again, I it would be so much easier to just not have to use them. But until something better comes along, that's the best we've got.
Well, honestly, I'm gonna say it'd probably be a hell of a lot harder not using these tools, but I see your point there,
Sure.
and that perfectly brings me into the next thing, which is has there been any? So I know predation is a huge issue in New Zealand, especially with kiwi birds and that kind of stuff. I presume it is. Um, like obviously you don't have kiwis in Tassie, but I presume predation is a big problem there as well,
Yeah, massive.
as it is here in Australia as well. Well, I say Australia, the you
Yeah,
know
well,
the connected land of Australia. I don't mean to be rude,
no, no.
but has there been any proposed alternative to the use of e-collars, especially specifically in the around predation?
No,
No.
no, not at all. Um, yeah, no, I've not heard any alternative. You know, it's keep them under effective control and on leash. Had a council person say there's no real clear definition of effective control. And yeah, there's no alternative to that they can say. Yeah, there's just nothing.
And as you know, one of the most common sayings in dog training, probably is management always fails,
Mhm.
right? We know that a latch on the door doesn't lock properly, a leash gets worn and breaks. Like management is never a solution, especially when we're dealing with dangerous and predatory behaviors, right? So it's it it's interesting what you said there, though. There's no definition of effective control. Did someone actually say that?
Yeah, and again, that's where sort of like, "Oh, great, I'm not gonna really continue this conversation because it's literally in the legislation. Your job is literally to enforce effective control." And this came as a whole saga of dangerous dogs in the area, and again trying to help the difficult job of being a council ranger, and going, hey, you've got a difficult job. I'd be more than happy to sort of make some suggestions as to what has worked in other areas. And the pushback was like an offense, as though like, how dare you tell me to do my job, and you tell people how they should own their dogs. And so again, when that sort of response gets thrown at me, it's like, great, cool. I'm definitely not going to get any traction there whatsoever. So all the best, and I'll just carry on doing what I do. Um,
And again, now we're back to no logical thinking, no actually looking at the dogs. We're back to ideology. Because you're trying to tell me how this works. Well, I know there's a God up above.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's a very sort of twisted and weird way of dealing with what is an increasingly pretty hardcore issue, whether it's reactivity or, wildlife killing. We've got so many little mini like kangaroos, paddy melons, and things like that that are just everywhere down here. And, again, dogs are going to chase them because they're predators, and there's no education on breed selection and, minimizing the overbreeding of hunting dogs so that these very beautiful, powerful hunting dogs are not given to families that don't really know what they've got, and don't really, I suppose, give the dog of that caliber a reasonable life that's going to minimize problems coming out other places. So, yeah, that's where again it sort of comes back to just sort of doing our own thing and quietly trying to help and show these decision makers the reality of it, and coming against this insanity of yeah, no real truth or logic. So that was across the board really.
I'm going to disagree with you there because I reckon we should come at this very fucking loudly, which is
Mhm.
what I'm hoping to do here by
Cool.
starting a
Yeah.
podcast and talking about these kind of things. But this perfectly segues into my next point, which was talking about genetics. And so genetics is probably the most ignored thing by average dog owners and also by a lot of dog trainers, I think. And I find a lot of people, and sorry, I shouldn't say a lot of people, a lot of dog trainers, and especially dog trainers on the more force free side of things, are just trying their hardest to make every single dog a couch potato. It's like they're anti drive because drive is what's creating a lot of these problems. Whereas, like, I am slowly moving more and more away from using food in my training and more into play because I'm working with Malinois, Shepherds, Kelpies, GSPs, like these dogs that just want to chase and bite and fight and do all these cool things, which you and I would see as cool and awesome things, right? But then the flip side of that is everyone's like, hey, if he won't take treats, then he's untrainable in this situation. And I guess that's where we take the next step and we go like, well, if playing tug, if taking food or playing tug isn't going to do the thing for you, then we're going to have to put some caps on it with the use of some aversive pressure. But yeah, genetics is it. Talk a little bit about that because I know you mentioned that on your website as well, and how you know wrong dogs end up in wrong homes, unfortunately.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
what can we do about that? How can we make people educate themselves beforehand? And, what are your thoughts in general?
Yeah, definitely. So I think a huge issue that I see is that as people become detached from nature and the reality of nature through the modern world, the dogs aren't really keeping up for a lot of ways. So, whether it's a protective breed or a hunting breed, we have genetically selected these dogs for hundreds, if not thousands of years to keep us safe, keep us fed with all these incredible genetic traits. And although we're watering them down in a lot of ways, and there's breeds that are watered down specifically for that, there is a widening gap between dogs that are still very genetically capable and increasingly soft people that are denying the nature of reality, or the reality of nature, rather. So that gap I see generally, as a very biased opinion, is widening, where the dogs are still genetically capable in what they're wanting to do, but through this process of indoctrinating people to deny nature and the reality of those types of interactions, yeah, that gap of ability is getting further and further apart, which is why dogs are being blamed as the problem instead of the people that are changing far too fast for dogs. And yeah, the dogs just can't keep up. We've got a lot of overbreeding of, farm and hunting dogs as well. So, where you've got these multi-million-dollar agencies going, man, there's more dogs than ever before being surrendered, and that sort of stuff. The targeted approach to the people overproducing these dogs, I would understand as a very sort of sane way to minimize the fallout of the overbreeding of these dogs, as opposed to banning tools that, again, have never been you know, no clear evidence or abuse of those tools. Um, and again, it wasn't that long ago that people were elbowing each other in the supermarkets for toilet paper around coronavirus. Who's to say that not too far off, these dogs will once again be keeping people safe because of where things are going? And, like it or not, a lot of people feel very safe knowing that they have a guardian. They might be living on their own, they might be elderly, they might have had them their whole lives. It's one of those things that it's been such a long relationship with dogs that we've had. To throw that out in the space of a couple of decades because 'cause they're not convenient, or then we're no longer relying on them, is just a really gross reflection of, humanity and a lot of people, I think. So, I think there's that sort of duality, that it is important to keep genetics healthy, resilient, and better them. But from my perspective, the reality is that as people become, again, less capable and Disneyfied in their opinion of nature, that's something that's increasingly hard as a trainer to try and fill that gap by coming up with games and tools and ways to make it easy and efficient for them to effectively communicate with those still very powerful dogs. And again, like, a lot of the dogs are perfect. They're great. They're like absolute legends, but they're just not convenient anymore. So we, get rid of them because it's these days seen as the kind of thing to do.
Yeah, it's uh it's actually really sad because both you and I, we work with a lot of high drive dogs, and I know a lot of trainers who work with these super intense dogs, and people just go like, I don't understand why my dog's aggressive. And I'm like, your dog is so unhappy because it doesn't get to do anything. You walk it for 10 minutes around the block, this working line German Shepherd, and you expect it to sleep on the couch for 23 hours and 50 minutes of the day. You're like, it's just not viable. It's just not right. And I mean, there are arguments about how long dogs have been around, but I guess the general consensus is between 10 and 40,000 years.
Mhm.
We've kind of been domesticating dogs over that period of time. But it's only in the last few hundred years that we've been going like, hey, I'm going to breed a GSP, a dog that is specifically bred to look in a particular way and to hunt this particular thing, same as Malinois, same as Shepherds, right? And then suddenly we go like, "Oh, I work 10 hours a day. No, now that's not convenient for me anymore." And it is such a shame, and like you were saying with watering down breeds as well, like that's something I'm not for at all. And I met with someone a couple of years ago who said they'd met a breeder who was trying to breed pet Malinois, and I'm like, why?
Yeah.
What? No one needs to live with a Malinois unless they actually want to live with a Malinois,
Mhm.
right? But yeah, we're trying to put the cap on everything instead of putting caps in place in terms of training, I guess. We're trying to cap genetic potential rather than saying, like, hey, can't have you fucking killing my chickens. Let's put a cap on that right here with some punishment, right?
Mhm.
And like exactly like you said, it is just inhibiting the potential of the dogs out there and some of these cool breeds that we work with all the time. Um, and yeah, it is quite sad at the end of the day, really.
100%. And that's where I'm constantly trying to make things easier, more efficient, and more targeted towards the dog's genetic um, capabilities, because so many times I've seen people give up so quickly. And what I would thought would be the bare minimum of energy and effort towards their dog has once again not been enough. So it's sort of trying to get some momentum happening into going, hey, instead of a stressful walk around your block where your dog might react a bunch, you can actually do this exercise to start with just in the backyard, which is a very small version of hunting. And from that, that's where that momentum can go, in the hopes that it'll sort of like motivate them to keep going, as opposed to just dodging every little bit of discomfort forever. So I think there's a lot to be said for just being realistic with where your average dog owner is at, not asking too much of them, but also not being, uh, completely detached from the reality of what that dog needs. And yeah, I think, uh, yeah, it's just that gap between dogs and people and how quickly people are changing is what's quite tricky to fill.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, man, I know we've been talking for nearly an hour and a half, and we do not have time to get into biological fulfillment.
Sure,
but
sure.
but maybe that's another chat we can have in the future because I'm loving this. But I want to just touch real quick on a thing that you said before, and that is that there is no evidence of abuse with prong collars, with e-collars recorded anywhere in Australia.
Okay.
And and the thing that the RSPCA especially are banging on about is that these tools are so cruel and abusive. But when you go to them and say, like, hey, show me a single recorded incident of abuse with one of these tools, and they actually have nothing. They produce zero. So these tools that we're banning based on abuse, here come the air quotes again, um, actually have no evidence of abuse. And it's funny because I know this was it wasn't the RSPCA, but it was a very kind of force-free, fee-free rescue group that posted this image of a dog that had big holes in its neck, and it had been shaved. It was in care, blah blah blah, and they said this is what prong collars do.
Mhm.
Now, for anyone who knows anything about animal abuse and actually pay attention to the dog training industry, that was an actual abuse case from America where a regular leather studded collar had been flipped inside out on a dog's neck and tightened so hard, and the dog had been tied up outside for several days. And you go like, so that is a regular thing that everyone's happy for their dogs to wear a studded collar, right? But someone flipped it inside out and intentionally used it to abuse a dog. Completely different from using a dog training tool that we're trying to help a dog reduce their arousal, work through their aggression, whatever it may be. But we're happy to spread this lie everywhere because they think it's for the benefit of the dogs. And that again brings me to another thing, which is we've seen worldwide many times that bans doesn't actually work, right? So prong collars are banned in Victoria. I see dogs on prong collars all the time, right?
Mhm.
It's not really being policed. The dogs are happy walking next to their owners, right? I don't know if you've seen the same down in Tassie, but um, I remember, I think this was Bart Bellin actually from Martin Systems, who said that he posted, and again, I've been trying so hard to find this, and hopefully I can find it and actually post it later on. But I just want to talk that real quick because I think it brings up a really good point. And so he was saying that when the e-collar was banned in Germany, sales of e-collars to Germany from other countries increased nearly 150%.
Mhm.
So, what does that mean? Well, obviously, it means that bans don't work because people are still using the tools. Now, the best case scenario of this situation is that there are trainers stocking up because they know, like, oh my God, I have to use these illegally now, but I need to have them because I work with super difficult dogs. The worst case scenario is that there are people who've been thinking about getting an e-collar and then they go like, oh shit, well now that they're banned, I have to get one, just to have one. And if it's the latter scenario, what actually happens is that abuse with these tools are going to increase because now people have access to these aversive tools, which can absolutely be abused if you if you don't know how to use them. But now we have a bunch of people with these tools who don't know how to use them and can't get professional guidance from people who actually know how to use them. And so the ban in Germany was actually way more likely to increase the amount of abuse through training tools simply because people didn't have access to the information on how to use them properly.
Let alone all the injuries from, flat collars and out of control dogs. You're getting the
Of course.
worlds, yeah. So it sort of double downs the damage when they are banned because now we've got dogs that need it without it, causing more danger and more injuries, and people that would have been doing the wrong thing anyway, now still doing the same wrong thing because they're, you know, more underground, more demonized, and I suppose yeah, like you said, are not coming with a level-headed education to minimize the misuse of them, as opposed to just being demonized as torture devices. And I'll often have a picture on hand if you just Google in an embedded harness.
Mm.
Harness being left on too long and basically cut the dog in half. It's like, are we banning harnesses because of these abuse cases? Like, it's not that the harness did that; it was the abuse behind it, which is true for food.
Mm.
The obese dogs that you see walking around. How is that not abuse? So yeah, it's a very sort of complicated picture, but as usual, governments make these decisions that are usually super inefficient, get the worst outcomes for everyone involved, and don't really fix the problem that they were intended to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 100%. And at the end of the day, like, if your intention is to abuse a dog, you can do that with a newspaper. So what do we do now? Do we ban newspapers? Right? I know that's a bit of a ridiculous statement, but
But that's
when
their own
people,
is that it is the tool that's doing the problem. That's exactly sort of what they're trying to get people to believe is that the tool is inherently cruel. There is no good way to use it. So yeah, that's absolutely not too much of a stretch when they're using that logic to justify the ban. It's really yeah, yeah.
absolutely, and that was the thing that they said in, I'm pretty sure that was New Zealand when they banned prong collars down there. The head of the RSPCA in, sorry, New Zealand came out and said, had a prong collar that she was holding up, and she said, "This is an inherently cruel tool." And you're like, no, that's a collection of metal bits put together.
Mm,
Now, the use of it, if you a dog daddy and walk around in fucking purple suits all the time, swinging helicoptering dogs on prong collars, of course they're abusive.
mm,
But that is not the tool. That's the fool behind the tool,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
All right. Sorry, I'm so sorry I'm taking up so much of your time, but I'm
No,
loving
no,
this
that's all right. No problem
conversation.
at all. It's all good.
And look, I've pretty much got three more little things that I want to talk about, and then I'm going to let you get back to training your board and train dogs. But dog training is an unregulated industry, and I have this conversation with a lot of people, and I'm very torn on it, and I'm always looking for, new ways of looking at it. So, what are your thoughts on creating some form of Australia-wide regulation system for who can be a dog trainer, what tools we can use, what methods, I don't know, like any form of regulation whatsoever.
Mhm.
I just want to hear your thoughts, and then I'll ramble a little bit about my thoughts on it
Yeah, sure.
afterwards.
Um, I think it's a great idea, but in my history of interacting with people in the dog world and all the organizations, it's not a realistic expectation. All the infighting, the different, um, maybe, some standard minimum standards could do well. But organizations that talk and go, I'm a registered trainer with this organization, and that involves doing no harm, and what the definition of that harm is just so ambiguous and open-ended that I don't see a real pathway to all those people coming together and agreeing on something, although I'd be very open to hoping that that would be achievable. In my understanding of where things are, that would cause more problems than it does benefits by deregistering me as being able to call myself a professional dog trainer. That's one of the things that the RSPCA and that those types of organizations would go, you can no longer have business insurance because we don't give you the tick of approval that you're an accredited trainer. So I sort of see it going and being weaponized in that capacity, as opposed to being of a benefit to make sure dickheads in the industry are kept out of giving people bad advice, because that's exactly what would happen if they did license that. So what entity that would fall under and what those rules would be, again, sounds wonderful, and I wish it would be a thing because there's a potential there to do that, but I just don't think that's a reality with where we're at the moment.
Yeah, no, and this is a conversation I've had with so many people because the way that I look at it, if we could actually regulate these tools, if there could be some kind of, I guess, common denominator for how you use them, whether that's e-collar, whether it's prong collars, slip leads, whatever it may be, any form of reversive tool.
Mhm.
If there was an actual education system around it, if there was some form of regulation around it, they would be harder to ban
Yeah.
because they're already in law, so to speak, of like, but then again, how regulated does it become? Does it become not nuanced at all? Do we end up like they do in Norway? So in Norway, e-collars are banned, right? Completely banned.
Mhm.
Except there are a few people who are allowed to use them strictly for stock avoidance.
Yeah.
And so that is literally e-collar at a level 100, fucking blast the dog while it's screaming and rolling on the ground until it stops chasing sheep,
Mhm.
right? Which, in my opinion, is a terrible way of using an e-collar and very limiting.
Yeah.
Right. No, sorry, I shouldn't say it's a bad way of using an e-collar because sometimes we have to use pain compliance, especially when it comes to things like predation. But if you can condition an e-collar, if you can teach a dog how the e-collar works, if you can use low-level corrections, suddenly you don't need that extremely high-level punishment necessarily in order to stop any form of predation.
Mhm.
Uh, so it's that thing where you're like, if they were regulated, they'd be less likely to be banned. But if they're regulated, who's regulating them? Exactly like you said, right?
Yeah.
And if someone goes to regulate dog training as a whole, then it's going to be the people with the most money, which is the RSPCA. And so now you and I are effectively not dog trainers anymore.
Yeah, that's right. And when it comes to, yeah, things like insurance or, you know, the just the inability to register a business because you're not accredited by these non-dog training entities, it becomes a bit dodgy. Something where it's like a federation or a guild which does have like a set of ethics that's opt-in and voluntary. Maybe that would give people a little bit more confidence in knowing that you're part of a group that does have a set standard of expectations. That could be a sort of halfway in between step. But certainly with the pinch collar, I asked the IACP, would it be beneficial to try and get some sensible regulations that are simple for them to implement to avoid the ban? But again, even that was a step too far for them. And the more you try and complicate those rules around that legislation, the more the politicians tend to go, listen, it's just so much easier to say no. This
Mm.
slant the optics because this thing looks like shit. So it's just way easier to get rid of it, and good luck helping, elderly people that own Rotties and big dogs that want to do big dog stuff. So it's a very tricky, nuanced sort of regulation area that is lost on a lot of politicians because it's too much effort.
Ah, fuck, that is such a sad but true way of looking at it, unfortunately.
I know. I kind of find myself often just sort of being so jaded and negative, and I'm trying not to. But again, you'd be insane after having interacted with local, state, and federal governments over a few different issues. It's hard to just sort of keep on having faith that all of a sudden good decisions will be made and sanity will prevail. But you got to stay happy regardless.
Yeah, unfortunately, sanity isn't really rampant these days, is it?
No.
Or yeah, just any form of sensible decision making doesn't seem to be in our vocabulary anymore these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. Awesome conversation. Let's finish out on some EC and hopefully slightly more positive ones. How can is there anything people can do now to help fight the e-collar ban in Tassie?
Yeah, absolutely. Show good work and share stories of dogs that would have otherwise been put down that are now living because of these tools. And I suppose do it in a way that is not the same as the other side, so to speak, in terms of personal nastiness, putting people down, and I suppose, you know, yeah, you're just using the same tactics that they do, like, I get emails from people pretending to be other people to, like, bait me into saying silly stuff, which is fine because 'cause I've got nothing that silly to say in that regard. But I think the more people that are brave enough to not being afraid of being called, like, abusive to animals or using fear or force to train animals, instead they're seeing happy dogs with people that clearly love them as an example of exactly what we're trying to attain, really cuts through all the nonsense and bullying that a lot of people on social media rely on. And I think from my perspective, a lot of people in the military and police that do have opinions on this, I would really ask them to be brave and as much as they can, try and have a say despite what they think the consequences might be. Sometimes that's serious, but more times than often, it's imaginary. You are allowed to have your opinion. You are allowed to show the reality of what these tools are used for. And I think that it's important that people aren't afraid to tell the truth and show the reality of it. So I think that along with whatever the government decides to do from here, whether they ask for more submissions or they're encouraging people to meet with them, I think the more that you can just sensibly get involved and tell the truth about what your experience is with these tools, I think that's going to go a long way to drown out the craziness that comes often from the other side. Because reading some of the submissions on the other side, they're their own worst enemy, and it's time for, I think, just truth, common sense, and reality to try and sway, again, hopefully some sensible decisions around stopping dogs needing to be euthanized for perfectly normal behaviors.
Well said. That was perfect. Yeah, no, that was incredibly well said, well spoken, and I couldn't agree more. The best thing that we can do is show our work. It is to show transformation in dogs, is to show that dogs aren't shut down, that they're happy, they're living a better life. And I get people contact me, like former clients, all the time, and they're like, holy shit, the e-collar has just changed my dog's life and our life as well, completely. Whether that is eliminating reactivity and aggression, whether it's giving a hunting dog an off-leash life where it's not a risk of killing anything. Yeah,
Yep.
I
Just
I
one other thing as well that I forgot, sorry, is
yeah,
there's a
go.
lot of sort of somewhat trainers like me that are just trying to sort of do their own thing and they're terrified of the pushback online. The way we dealt with that as best we could was through, whoever it is, and we're not really on a lot of dog groups, but just to say, hey guys, at the moment I'm copying a shitload of heat from, the weight of the crazies on the internet. If there's anyone that could share a story about how e-collars have helped them, that would just sort of balance it out a little bit. I don't want you to attack them. There's no need to sort of say how good I am as a trainer, but just to show people reading the comments, but not necessarily interacting, that there are lots more people that don't really spend a lot of time on the internet that are willing to be brave enough to sort of say, hey, this is my experience with them. And hey, this trainer has helped me, this tool has helped me, just to again balance out the reality towards it. Because I think when you're isolated and somewhat feel alone, or you're not really part of that big community, asking people for help if you are targeted is something that can really sort of abate that fear and give you that confidence that there are a lot of people out there that would be willing to sort of help you when it comes to that. Because, yeah, it is a horrible thing for people to sort of threaten you and, try to negatively review your business and all that sort of stuff. And I think a counter to that is to try and, yeah, ask people for help just sensibly to go, hey, I'm being targeted. And I've often, at least my personal experience, is that's a lot more in my head than in reality. Because as soon as I reach out to these people and say, hey, let's meet up and have a chat, like nothing sus, nothing, I'm not going to sort of like try and bully you or show you up. It's just something like that. They never have. They're not really got any alternatives for me, and they're not willing to meet and have an adult discussion. So I've definitely got caught in my own head where the blowback has been imagined as opposed to reality. And luckily, at least in this part of the world, it's mostly word of mouth, and we've not really struggled whenever that's been directed towards us because most people are nice and very reasonable when you lay things out.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point as well, and especially to hear for maybe new trainers that are listening to this, because if you're a new trainer and you're starting your business and you post something about e-collars, which is what I did when I first started out, holy shit, the fucking flood of people that came after me
Yeah.
was quite intense. And but I'm the kind of person who I don't give a fuck about anyone else's opinion, right?
Yeah.
And so I just keep posting about e-collars and people keep commenting and they keep coming in after me. And now they've given up. I
Yep.
think they've just given up on me because they're like, well, this guy, he's obviously not abusing dogs because he's posting videos of it all the time and he doesn't give a shit about what we say to him. So
And
they
I think
kind of give up. But yeah,
yeah, well within your rights to block and ban people as well. You really have no obligation to those people that are there just to be nasty, to interact with them at all. Like, again, for the people that don't want to, that's fantastic. But life's too short to try to interact with these people that just have nothing good to contribute.
100%. I could not agree more. All right.
Awesome.
Anything you want to close out on?
No,
Any
not really.
last words, any
So
last
much
advice,
for
whatever it may be?
Yeah, no, really appreciate the opportunity to bring a bit of light to it. Again, it's one of those things that is a bit of a long run, and ultimately, whatever happens, it's just important that you try to, you know, be at peace with yourself that ultimately you did try and do the right thing, no matter the outcome, and recognize that we're not really living in a sane system. So don't panic if decisions that are made end up in that craziness. At least you did what you thought was right, and to if you are struggling or if you do have any questions that are Tasmanian specific, I'm always happy to chat with people as to how they could help or any questions they do have around it. But thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I'm very glad that there's other people out there that are willing to talk about this. Your submission to the government was fantastic and really laid out a lot of the reality of it. So thanks very much for doing that. And trying to bring awareness to it because we definitely need as many people as possible on the side of sanity.
Absolutely. No, and thank you for that. I appreciate that. But it was great having you on. Spruik your stuff. Where can people find you? Let's do that whole
Yeah.
social media thing right now.
Yeah, sure. So I'm very lazy on social media. I really don't do a lot, but it is Huon Valley K9.com.au. And that's pretty much it. We're luckily locally busy, so we don't really do seminars or anything like that. It's just in the local area helping people as we can. And yeah, that's about it, really. Thanks again.
Ooh, we might need to have a conversation because I run a full day e-collar workshop. Maybe I have to bring that down your way,
Yeah,
and we
absolutely.
can invite some politicians and actually show some real life work.
Yeah, definitely. We did put on one at some stage, which was great. And yeah, it's definitely there's always a need for more and more people to see the reality of it. So who knows what's in the future?
Awesome. All right, Ben Barnes, Huon Valley K9 over in Tasmania. Thank you so much for coming along. And to everyone listening, I hope this was an interesting conversation for you. I hope it's brought to light some of the issues that we have surrounding tools and tool bans and that kind of stuff. And that you're willing to jump on and make a submission make a submission, fuck me, make a submission the next time these issues come around. But for now, go train your dog. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Beastly Talks. I hope you found it interesting and that you'll join me for the next one as well. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to rate and review it so that more people can hear about it. Or if you think this particular episode would benefit a family member, friend, or colleague, be sure to share it with them directly. You can follow me on social media at Viking Dog Trainer on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you for your support and keep training your dog.